Oh, also, we'll see. We'll see.
One of those is going to be wrong, so I might as well. Yeah, so I fear they'll do something like this, and then when it's time for that design, you want to stay, like, you really like this stuff, you want to stay somewhere in that special operations. Continue to do that.
I have to do that.
I don't think they have anything that says, hey, I was already part of this, or special SCI, they call it, special certification. It doesn't sound like that. So they don't have anything. You go with their big folder, their folder, yeah, that's common. Well, that's not cool, but that's again one of the things. Like, it would, I would more be like, hey folks, this is, you know, if you wanted to kick down doors and things like that, you can start here. It's a good platform to get into the pro stove stuff or something along those lines. I don't necessarily know if they have that built from that particular. It's not bad though. It's just right now. It's just what it is. Yeah, it's what they don't have it now. Maybe there's a future, but you look after your own career. Talk to leaders and talk to mentors that are in that community, and that's how you kind of find out. Oh, okay, there's a job opportunity. Make sure you prove that before you see something.
On board. You want to say that?
Wow. This is not starting on Tuesday. So it'll be yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say tomorrow, but I'm actually start next week. Yeah. And I need to set this weekend. It's gonna be a fun weekend. Yep.
Okay. All right, show me. Okay, how do we, so.
Back in Zoom and then it's
I'll see if it makes me feel better, but we'll say kids.
Oh, never mind.
Yeah.
She got her class pass on there.
What?
Because they was trying to see what pass they need to put on their right shoulder.
Oh.
I was trying to find something that you could put here in the middle, like a stand or something, so you can put your computer on.
Yeah.
you need to give me permission to record.
All right, let me look at this.
Allowed to record local files. Great. All right, I'm good to go. I just need to plug in.
Okay.
Is there an announcement?
Is it, if you're seeing it on there? Can you,
Yeah, and I'm able
On
to
the
press
link.
and record.
on the, if you click on a link, does it show? Or do we have to wait until 3:30? For me, it doesn't show. Sure, I'm gonna text it to you
Okay.
and tell me if you can.
And I'm not on Wi-Fi, so my data is turned off for YouTube right now. But if you, it's on.
It's on here. Oh yeah, my bad. On your business. I'm gonna sit in front of it. We're gonna be recording you guys for the stream.
Is this my hand? Oh, I'm behind.
It has a lag, a pretty long lag,
Wait,
a really, really long lag.
Possible deniability.
oh my gosh, yeah, that's some lag.
Yeah.
That's shit.
Oh, that's right. He was outside.
Wow, I'm underrepresented. Yeah, I don't make a shit about Sierra. I got
We're gonna come up and
I won't talk about that. We don't speak about that around these parts. Should we scoot?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, should we sit up?
Do you have chairs? Do we need more chairs for you all?
No, we're good.
Do we have, are you organized by shred at all?
No. Do you want us to be organized by shred?
No, it doesn't matter. We're planning to probably do a quick round robin of ask a question and have, each shred.
I would say each shred probably like do an intro.
Yeah.
Like this is what the shred is. Should we do that?
Yeah, I just like you describe what mission you guys do,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then we have a couple of more questions and then just put it up there. So it's kind of like a round robin type thing.
Yep, yeah.
I think we're good to get started. We got the live stream and we'll let me start recording and I'll start recording and then we're ready to go. All right, everyone, thank you for coming out on a Thursday afternoon for this AFSC panel. Lieutenant Michael Sisti just started training a week and a half ago with Captain Kimball over here and ICF.
Who's your mentor?
Our mentor
Oh, that's right.
is up here with Captain Eves. But we organized this for getting more info about each of the shreds. So what's going to happen is we have some instructors here who have generously donated their time. We're going to go through, get an idea of what each shred's mission does, some other quick intro questions, and then open it up for Q&A to answer the questions that are most closely on your mind. So to start it off, we're going to go through each of the shreds and just describe what does your shred do and what are the main missions you do and what is a typical assignment for a new LT coming out of UCWT. And then we'll take it from there. So if we want to have the Sierra Alphas and then Bravos and then Delta Alphas, Delta Bravos, just go in that order, that works.
My name is Steve Comer. I am a 17 Sierra Alpha, and with me is Sergeant Lyons. He is a 1 Bravo 4. And specifically, the 1-4s don't have a delineation in their AFSC between offense and defense, but Sergeant Lyons does offense. So we both have done operational work in the offensive community. And generally what we're responsible for is creating effects in adversary cyber terrain to support projection of power for a variety of different mission sets. That's the basic gist of the Sierra Alpha / offensive portion of the 1B4 community. And after leaving UCWT, a lieutenant is most likely to go, will definitely go to training next, more training. That training in total for a Sierra Alpha at a minimum is going to include the Air Force Basic Operator Course, AFPOC, which is your IQT or Initial Qualification Training. And that's going to be at the 39th Information Operations Squadron, Detachment 1 in San Antonio. You'd be there for something on the order of 4 to 5 months. And then you would potentially either go on to more training or to an operational assignment directly from that point. There's a lot of nuance and variety of different assignments that are possible, but in general, I'll say the default is for that Sierra Alpha officer to go to a cyberspace operations squadron that typically is providing manning and support to the Cyber Command cyber mission forces, which is the way that we conduct offensive operations. It's the combatant command that conducts those offensive operations for us. So that's the basic gist of that. Sergeant Lyons, you gonna add anything?
For the 1B4s, like you said, it's going to shred out, but for anyone that is going this path, especially the Sierra side, you will be working with 1B4s. Came along because for the Alpha side, especially for the operator pipeline, you'll be working side by side as pretty much equals for the next several years after class, which is why I got a call sign Nancy so that you kind of like cut through those barriers. But you'll be training with, be trained by, and training 1B4s and then your sister service equivalents. So a lot of shared experience across the board. So yeah, go see what's fun. Do it.
Yeah. The training is difficult, but don't let that discourage you.
Thank you, Sierra Bravos. Introduce yourself and what your shred does.
I'm Rudy, Captain Henry Mills. You'll find me in the Gal. 17 Sierra Bravo. Similar culture to what you find in OCO, but it's DCO. It's finding the adversary, making recommendations, and mitigating the risks that exist in our network to prevent those adversaries accessing it again. So most of my experience was on a cyber protection team where we're focused on individual pieces of the network at a time. We deploy our weapon system on the individual enclave, come back home, monitor the data that we're collecting from that enclave over time in order to protect a particular piece of the mission partner's mission. Additionally, you could be on a CSSP, a cybersecurity service provider, like the 33rd Network Warfare Squadron, where you're doing 24/7 monitoring of logs across the network in order to conduct your threat hunt mission in that way with a broader scope, less focused than what a CPT is going to be. Additionally, you could be in a position at an OSCOS, which are the ones who are chiefly interested in the availability of the Air Force network, but it's important too to have a defensive viewpoint in the unit. So similar cultures, just like he was describing, I was also working directly with 1-4s as a brand new lieutenant operator. It's interesting in that you have more of an opportunity to do that, to work with prior service who have reclassified from other enlisted AFSCs and lean on their experience and wisdom and knowledge, as opposed to the experience you might get as a new 17 Delta lieutenant, where you're given, a collection of 3Ds who may be first term just like you. So I was blessed to be on a CPT where I could lean on strong 1-4s who have more experience in the Air Force than I did. So you get a unique perspective there as a new 17 Sierra. Anything to add?
So Chris Trostnik, also DCO 17SB. Similar experience with Rudy working with the protection teams. Again, right, 1B4s, amazing resources, especially because with prior walks of life, you learn a lot. The only other thing I had is you can also go into other staffing positions. My last stint, before I came here, was the primary as the defensive operation planner for United States Transportation Command, because they don't always have their own planners. So they pull from the services for those types of work. But there's a lot of DCO bodies that and I'll pile on. So I came from one of the NOSs, like Captain Mills had mentioned. So I came from the 26 NOS to do network enterprise operations, and so that's more of a operational floor. You'll have a team of enlisted and civilian and contractor folks that are on that operations floor, and as the officer, you're looking over that team as a crew commander. You're maintaining operations of the network itself and the availability of the network, but at the same time, you're using that DCO training and that DCO lens to look at trends and data and work together with various other organizations that are out there to pinpoint known threats, indications of compromise, those type of things within the metadata.
Delta Alphas.
I'm the Delta Alpha.
Yeah.
I'm actually a Sierra Bravo, but a Delta Alpha, prior Delta Alpha. My name is Captain Jay Kimball. Delta Alpha, what can you expect? IT operations. If you've ever wondered or thought about an IT or an installation like Keesler Air Force Base, if it beeps or squeaks, you as a 17 Alpha are going to be responsible for it. What does that mean? You can work at a comm squadron. So there's usually some type of comm or IT operations entity at every location, Air Force installation across the world. So you can go and be a 17 Delta Alpha anywhere in the world almost that there is an IT operations. You can serve within, I would say, my background is more ISR focused. So I've worked at two large comm squadrons, one really baby comm squadron. And then for the latter half of my career, I spent within a Green Door, so intelligence community at the National Reconnaissance Office, and then within DGS. So if you look at, you also have some 17 Delta Alphas at the NOSs, but the responsibility, if it beeps or squeaks, you are managing it. As a 17 Delta Alpha, what you will get, I think more than some of the Sierra, they mentioned a lot of training. I'm not saying you won't get a lot of training as a Delta Alpha, but what you will be thrown into is leading. So if that's something that excites you, it's an opportunity to jump right in, and you're probably going to do more IT operations projects, planning, and execution. How do you maintain the base? How do you maintain the unit that you support from an IT operations perspective? So I guess that's Delta Alpha in a nutshell.
I'd like to add something on the Delta Alpha side. So I teach the offensive cyber operations block. And one of the points that I always highlight in that block of instruction, especially in the previous versions of the course where we had everyone, regardless of what shred you were going to, where everyone was coming through the OCO block, that's no longer true, but the point is still valid that as an offensive operator, the scariest thing is a competent and effective network administrator and device administrator
On the enemy side.
on the enemy side, right? So that is your adversary as an offensive operator, and you have the chance to be that competent network administrator and to keep the bad guys out. It's a really, really important job, and if a network is configured correctly and managed correctly and done tightly, it's really, really hard for Russia and China to break into our networks, and that is the goal. So you have a tremendous responsibility as a Delta Alpha to keep the adversary out.
If I can pile on one more thing for the Delta Alphas, each time that my cyber protection team deployed out, the Delta Alphas with whom I met that very first day were the subject matter experts that I had to learn from for that first week or two while I was trying to gain an appreciation for that mission. And in order for me to protect it, I had to know what those Delta Alphas knew. They had to teach me. So you have a lot of responsibility as a Delta Alpha. You will be the subject matter expert for the missions that are run on your base and the systems that enable the mission.
Okay, I'm Captain Brandon Eves. I'm your resident, or one of the resident Delta Bravos, K-17 Delta Bravo. Expeditionary communications. So the mantra of expeditionary communications is just communications on the go. Okay, so that means within an hour's alert all the way to building up a base and sustaining that base. So lieutenant assignments out here as a Delta Bravo, you're looking at going to combat communication squadrons, special operations, support squadrons. We also have some joint assignments that are available as well. Joint communications unit, joint communications support element, special tactics group, Again, on the move comms. The difference again with Delta Bravo, kind of with Delta or with Sierra Alpha Sierra Bravo, is you're going to lead. Okay, you're going to be leading people straight out the door. There's a lot of crossover with the Delta Alpha community as well as the Delta Bravo community. Delta Bravo is just basically a Delta Alpha with just a different little spin on it a little bit. If you like to travel, if you like to be outside, if you like to at least be under stress, be a little uncomfortable. I know you don't like to be uncomfortable, but if you like to, meet that challenge, Delta Bravo might be the community for you. And I can talk later about kind of what some of my experiences are on that. But again, on the go comms, setting up comms in a tactical environment, and then leading airmen that are helping you do that all over the world. Matra 17 Delta Bravo. Okay.
In general, we don't even have windows in our squadrons, so consider that.
So running Joe.
I went on a 3-week exercise in New Zealand wine country. So if you want to do that,
Yeah, they were paid in blood. So one point I think is worth emphasizing is that, like they mentioned on the Delta side, you will directly and immediately go into a leading airman role. It is not that you won't do that on the Sierra side. It's just that there's more training and you spend a little bit more time at the tactical execution level before you move into those more operational leadership positions. And I am 7.5 years into my career, and I have never been a flight commander. However, I have led groups of 20, 30, 40 people to execute tactical and operational objectives. So it's not that there's not leadership on the Sierra side. It's just it's a little bit delayed, and it's a little bit different flavor from what you're going to get on the Delta side.
In the problem on CBTs, there's a good chance that if you fall into an element, which is how teams are organized, you will probably have 5 to 10 people immediately under you, but it won't be the size of the Delta Alphas where they get all the chunk.
Or the Delta Bravo.
Right. And you will have most likely an NCOIC, right? Like my first element, I had one before, there was a prior special forces, security forces, daggers or whatever they're called. Super whip sharp guy, he just did everything for us. It was great, right? So you will get leadership, it's just way more delayed and way more intimate. You have a small group of people.
And so one more slight nuance to Sierra Bravo versus Sierra Alpha is you have a little bit more opportunity earlier on to balance that tactical operator kind of character with your Air Force leader character. Because like he said, on a CBT, you might immediately be an element lead over 5 to 10 1 Bravo force. But by the time you're a captain, you may have the opportunity to be a team lead, which in the Air Force is equivalent to a flight commander. As a captain, you'll be over a Cyber National Mission Force team, 39, 40 members right underneath you, being both the TACON control, managing the operations that you're running globally from a tactical level, as well as taking care of your airmen from an administrative perspective as the AdCon.
Great. So now that we have a bit of a description, we got 2 more questions before I want to open it up to the audience. What would you say is the biggest misconception about your shred?
I'll start. All right. 17 Delta Bravo, right? So you're going to be outside, you're going to be doing stuff. Okay. You're not going to be shooting people. All right. You're not an operator. Okay. You're a communications operator. You're not a special tactics operator. You're not a crow. You're not a stow. You're not a Green Beret. All right. You are enabling those people to do their job. Okay. You're setting up their operations center. They're going to be coming in and out of your tent using the computers, the phones, the radios, the things that you set up for them to be able to talk to each other. Okay. You're going to send them out with a kit. But you yourself, again, common misconception. And I know you want to do it, right? I want to do it, right? Be chill. But guess what? I'm not a Green Beret. All right. I'm an expeditionary communicator. That's my role. So that's common misconception, Delta Bravo.
I thought the biggest one for Delta Bravo was they just like big old fat dippers and
That's not really that common of a misconception.
So it's a common.
A little both. Yeah, it's a common occurrence.
Where's the spitter at?
I would say a misconception across the Sierra community is that you will be smarter than your enlisted folks. That's absolutely not the case. It is very much true that if you are not learning from your 1 Bravo force in the Sierra community, you're doing it wrong. they, in many cases, will be more educated, more trained, and more technical than you. And so you need to walk in with a humble attitude and understand that while you have the responsibility to become as much of an expert as you possibly can, it's very likely that the 1 Bravo 4s are going to be smarter than you, and you need to learn from them.
Yeah, there have been many times mission execution, the staff sergeant 1 Bravo 4 was the actual technical lead. And my job was just to make sure that the major on the other side didn't yell at him. He was the host guy, he knew what he was doing, he was the expert. And I just follow. And that is a mindset to have quite a bit. I thought, this year Alpha was like, don't you over and eat some for sure off.
White places.
Black places. Yeah, I have one.
The key in the Sierra community is that the emphasis is on what is right, not who is right, and also not what rank is right. So when you're on an operations floor, it's about what is the technically correct answer to get the job done. It is not about who outranks who. I have been in plenty of situations where an E4 has the correct answer and the O4 does not. That's a very common thing that you're going to run into.
And so to be that officer there to provide that top cover for your subject matter expert who's an E4, 5, 6, that's a pretty valuable place to be. That's a pretty critical role for you to be able to empower your airmen in that way so that the mission partner accepts those right answers from them.
And one piece of nuance to that is that it's not an excuse for you to not know your technical material by any stretch.
Captain Kimmel, any Delta Alpha misconceptions?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest ones that I hear, that Delta Alphas are not technical, that it's reserved for the folks that do not compute, right? No, you are absolutely going to be challenged every single day with technical problems, right? And if you think like, I don't computer today, and I want to go to DXA because it's the easy path, and I'm not a Sierra Alpha, I'm not a Gucci Leap Hacksaw. As they had talked about, they said, you need to understand the missions in which you enable on your infrastructure, right? You will own the base infrastructure. If you're at a base comm squadron, you will need to be technical and understand what is going on in order to be an effective DXA. It doesn't mean that, hey, if you didn't score 22, or even if you did, that there isn't room for you as a DXA to do exciting technical work. There's plenty of room for that. So that is, I think, the biggest one I hear.
Great. My last question before I want to open it up is, do you think there are particular personality traits that would draw someone to a particular mission set? So for example, Delta Bravo is always going out there, sense of adventure, being really of interest, or the Sierra Bravos constantly being on those different mission defense teams, having to learn new mission sets for new mission partners, having more of a curiosity to learn new things and be that people person aspect, getting to communicate with those different people in different organizations on a regular basis. Since we all have different personalities and interests and are trying to vector what track jives best with us.
I'd say across the board for all of the 17X community, if you stop learning when you graduate from this course, you have failed. Our domain changes so fast that if you are not continuously learning and if you're not a lifelong learner, you're behind. So it doesn't matter which of the shreds you're in or which of the communities you're in, we are one community, and you need to be technical and you need to not defer technical responsibility to people below you, around you, above you, whatever it might be. That is your responsibility to keep up with the trends in technology, and that takes constant effort and work to do that.
We need critically thinking, creative problem solvers in all 4 shreds.
We need people that are to integrate with things outside cyber too. We need folks to be able to see the bigger picture of what the Air Force does, especially when you go to a base as a Delta Alpha. If you go to a base and there's a specific wing designation, so they're air refueling wing, they're fighter. There's tenant units that are there that do unique missions. You have to be able to expand outside of just living in your communications element and your cyberness, and reach out and see the bigger picture and be that conduit between your peers, your CGO peers, while you're out there in the field, so that you can show what is important to them for the things that you do, but you also need to know what's important to them to provide them the service and support that they need to get the mission.
I think from a Delta Bravo perspective, and much like Delta Alpha as well, you're going to be thrown into a leadership position early on. So your ability to show and rely on those interpersonal skills that you have is key. I think kind of a sense of adventure, wanting to solve problems, I think necessarily isn't just for Delta Bravo. I think it's across the board. Taking in problems and having ownership of those things and wanting to find the solutions is definitely a trait across all of the AFSCs here. But I think a subtle difference, as we kind of highlighted, is especially the Delta Alpha, Delta Bravo perspective, you're going to be thrown into that leadership opportunity earlier on. I had a flight of 75 people at my first assignment, basically. I wasn't the flight commander, but was dealing with a lot of things, right? So I had to rely on my interpersonal skills to enable the operations of that unit. So your ability, again, to work with humans and to empathize and to solve those human problems is an emphasis item, especially, I would say, at the Delta Bravo, Delta Alpha initial assignment opportunities.
I think, all shreds, it's right to make, right, we're calm, right, we all need to be effective communicators. Technical expertise that can talk to people who aren't technical experts, right? The Delta Alphas eventually are going to become the CIOs of their base, right? They're going to be people advising pilots on what communication is solved. The Sierra side is going to be a little more outspoken, but I don't need a super technical lieutenant who can't talk to a major who doesn't want to be technical. Right? That's a huge problem. Communicators across the board, and then technically experts.
Thank you so much for that. I'd like to open it up at this point. Just raise your hand and we can have you introduce yourself and ask your question. Yeah, go ahead.
Please stand at attention. No, I'm just kidding.
Report out.
So, my question is just across the board. What would you say are the biggest obstacles for you on a space with wing leadership and requiring certain things for your mission subset from a budget standpoint and understanding standpoint versus other mission sets on base?
Take that one.
Okay.
I'm a budget guy. I can't do staff. You have to. I think the toughest thing is showing your relevance as a cyber domain in all the rest of the domains. And I say that is because everything that you're doing, especially on a base support type of function or a expeditionary force support type function, you are supporting what that top tier mission is. So what they're doing. And so a lot of times we can get in trouble by doing cyber for cyber's sake, and we'll get stuck in we need these new computers and we need these new servers because they're better and they're faster, but we never get to why. Why is it better that we have these? Why is it? It's not the faster, it's the, hey, I can take your kill chain that's 5 minutes now to do a planning operations down to 2 minutes. And the reason I can do that is because you're not waiting for Windows 10 to load for those extra 3 minutes. But at the same time, you have to be able to show the things that you're doing in your domain are projecting power in their own, especially when you're in the Sierra tiers, but also being a force multiplier for those other missions that are out there. And when the wing and group commanders see that, they say, okay, these lieutenants are supporting their boss, their commander, with these projects or these efforts. And you've taken the time to put that type of brain power and technical advance into those projects, then they're going to get the funding. They're good because they're going to get tied, and they're going to bring that wings mission up that next notch that it needs to be. Because we need that. We are behind the curve in some of our areas.
Who knows what the AFSC is of the 81st Training Wing Commander? Not Tony. All right, Tony, go ahead.
Thank you, the comptroller,
Okay, what's a comptroller?
budget.
Budget, right? He's a finance guy. Okay, so there's a comm squad on the base here, right? You think he knows like what a server does and is? Think he knows how to get an electron from point A to point B? Right? Maybe a little bit, right? He might understand. But when there are new projects and there are things happening on the base communications wise, he doesn't know jack. I'm gonna tell you right now. Okay. Your job, right? Especially from a Delta Alpha perspective, when you go to whatever base you go to, your job is going to be to translate that technical stuff, that technical jargon, that stuff that needs to happen, that your enlisted folks are doing, and that project you need to get done is to translate that technical stuff into digestible words, digestible phrases for that finance wing commander that doesn't know what the hell you're talking about, right? So that's going to be your main role. And if you do that in an effective way, you'd be surprised at the amount of power you wield and the amount of stuff you can get done on your base if you can effectively do that. So I'd say that's kind of putting a little spin on your question there, but that's definitely going to be one of the main roles that you as a young lieutenant have going into those new leadership roles is translating technical solutions and jargon into digestible and understandable terms, both from a Delta Alpha and Delta Bravo perspective too. So definitely on the Delta Bravo side.
There's a great book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. If you haven't read that, I highly recommend it. One of the tenets in that book is to speak in terms of the other person's interests. And so in addition, following on to what both Major Ray and also Captain Eve said, I have personally found it helpful to phrase it in terms of what's going to happen if you don't fund this. So to flip it on the negative side and say, if you don't upgrade these servers, if you don't pay for this really expensive training to continue educating our workforce, here's what will happen as a result. And some of that is guesswork and prediction, but that's your job, is to convince them why they need to be spending that money. I found that book helpful in that context, and also framing it from a what happens on the negative side if you don't pay for this.
Some more recommended reading on the same point is, I can't remember who the author is, but he was one of the 781st, which is the Army cyber unit at Fort Meade. He was one of their first operators, so he did OCO. He went on to write a book called Cyber Jutsu, which takes concepts of ninjutsu, which meaning as it is, combines with cyber and teaches you how to take cyber concepts that are very, very technical and speak to a leadership role. So his goal is to teach CEOs and COOs why they should care about this using cyber. So it'll give you that lens of exactly cyber. And it's not just on the wing defense side, it's also on the OCO side. A lot of your higher level OCO commanders might be former pilots. So they might know kinetics, but they might not understand the cyber piece. So if you can shape it, like you said, with a negative impact towards their lens, then that's always going to happen.
Some of you may face similar struggles too, like actually within your cyber chain of command, within your comms chain of command. Like in addition to translating these technical things to non-technical people, some of you guys are already familiar with the CIA triad, right? Confidentiality versus availability. Some of your traditional comm leaders may have only been primarily focused on availability up to this point, right? Because we need comms to drop bombs. But you as a defender one day, or as a Sierra operator, may need to justify why we need to reduce availability in some places to make our defenses better, right? Or maybe even justify why we need to allow the adversary to get a little bit further so that we can collect a little more intelligence, right? Instead of just being reactionary and playing whack-a-mole to get them out of the network. So kind of a similar thing. It's not all about necessarily translating the technical to non-technical, but also helping technical leadership to appreciate different perspectives. Good question.
No.
With the,
So talk about that too.
Why is there a sword class?
with the landscape constantly changing, and I've heard some Delta Alphas talk about how many of their job responsibilities may be contracted out eventually. Where do you see the shreds going in like 10 years? Or maybe the career field as a whole in 10 years?
10 years, bro. How many minutes?
I think there's a trend towards specialization, which I think is important personally. Our community, we have a lot in common, but we also have a lot that's not in common. And my personal opinion, you will hear mixed opinions on this. My personal opinion is that we currently favor breadth more than we favor depth, or at least that's the history we're working from. And I think over the 10 years from now, I think we're going to continue to further specialize. And so that one way to view that is that your experience is more stovepipe, more isolated, but each of the specialties that we have in our community is very deep and very technical. And if you are constantly being plucked from one and put into another, it's very difficult to gain subject matter expertise. And there's a concept called perpetual amateurism that is very likely to result if you are constantly bouncing between vastly different mission areas. So my guess would be trend towards specialization.
That perpetual amateurism is kind of analogous to the traditional Air Force officer development model, though, right? You PCS all around so that you can get a wide breadth of experience. That's why we're becoming more focused with our shred outs now, so that our defensive leaders one day can have built on that experience as a defensive operator, as an offensive operator, as an expeditionary. So it's going to be a little more restrictive going forward compared to 10 years ago.
I think going back to what Casper was talking earlier, with how fast our domain modifies and changes, right? It's really hard to make 5, 10, 15 projections, which is difficult for the DoD because that's the way they think. Say enterprise as a service comes online in 10 years. Well, what we consider traditional IP space now may not even be a thing in 10 years, right? As we start moving to more advanced networks, more machine learning, more AI, neural networks, all kinds of things that potentially come online, just completely change our game. It's really hard to project what these 4 shreds will be beyond. There's always going to be a need for offensive people. There's always going to be a need for defensive people. There's always going to be a need for somebody to maintain the domain. There's always going to be a need for somebody to help somebody put holes in somebody else's head over on the other side of the top, right? So the functions will never go away. We'll stay specialties. But it's hard to project what will actually be the domain.
If you do want a 10-year look, though, there is the Cyber Warfare Flight Plan, which actually is the Air Force's 10-year reach. So,
Subject to change.
Yes.
always.
Yeah.
Yeah. On the enterprise IT thing, I could speak on that a little bit. There are very smart, intelligent leaders that recognize that we can't give up our responsibilities for military operations on the network because we've decided on the structure that it is right now. And so it is, there are risk factors into just contracting out our network stuff. So we're still going to continue to need to have leaders and military operations and military decision-making made with our infrastructure, no matter what it grows into. And so I personally feel that we're not going to release that at all. So we're still going to need folks that are in that line of work and that line of thought process. And they should be specialized in that rather than kind of jerked around to different say platforms and things like that. Yeah. So there's maturity in our community that as we parallel up to like 14N community, we're working to mature very much like they are, where they take care of the talent management of their officers and keep them in good circles to be get out of that persistent amateurism.
What else? Yeah.
I'm pretty interested in staying close to the keyboard and software development. So it's probably on the Sierra side. We speak to different software development opportunities, whether that's developing payloads on the alpha side or sense vector capabilities on the also one of the things that Air Force has software factories and support.
Yeah, so the software development side, I think the first caveat before we go down this rabbit hole is that by default, the Air Force and the military and the DoD, we buy things. So that's an important recognition to start with. So anything that is trending toward the idea of internal organic, like people wearing a uniform doing development is outside the norm. So understand that you're putting yourself in a position where that might not be something you can do your whole career. However, so that's the caveat, but there are lots of opportunities to do software development. So you mentioned the software factories, that's one piece. That's, I would say, more traditional. I'm going to say business in the generic sense. I don't mean that it's for a company, but business application development is generally what the software factories do. So they'll build a piece of software that will run on a server somewhere, accessible via the internet, and it will provide some sort of function to the users. That's one type of software development. That's the software factories domain generally. The other piece of that, and that's a very, very important thing that we need and that we have struggled with in the past, so it's important. However, software development for offensive and defensive capabilities is a very different ballgame. And regardless of, so if you end up in the Sierra community, regardless of what your duty title is, I promise you that your operational organization will have a need for more capabilities than it currently has. And so if you have a software development background, don't worry if your duty title is not software developer, you will have an opportunity to develop capabilities. If you're in an OCO or DCO unit or a Delta unit, it doesn't matter. If you have the ability to develop software, software is the fundamental unit of our domain. It is how our domain is constructed and built and maintained. So if you understand how to manipulate software and build software, you'll be in a position to provide to your leadership increased capability from what they have right now. So that's a great position to be in. And I don't know of any Air Force or DoD leader in general who, if you offer them something that increases their warfighting capability for free, no one is going to say no to them. And then more specifically, there are a couple different programs you can go into. One is called the Computer Network Operations Development Program, Cnodp. It is a, what's that? Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to predict the future too much, but I think it's quite likely that that'll be the best assignment I will have ever had. And the reason for that is that you work at NSA and other places in the intelligence community and also with Cyber Command for 3 years, doing, as long as it relates to computer network operations, doing effectively whatever you want. There aren't too many places in the military where you get to decide what you do with your time, pretty much exclusively. So that's a fantastic opportunity. I don't want to derail this conversation, but if people have questions about Cnodp, feel free to send me an email or find some other way of contacting me. I'd be happy to chat about that. But that is an opportunity that exists. The other piece is the 90th Cyberspace Operations Squadron. That is the Air Force's organic offensive defensive capability development organization. So it is very possible to get an assignment to the 90th Cyberspace Operations Squadron. And if you were doing that, you need to be in the 17th Sierra group. You can either do it as offensive or defensive. They do both. They do capability development for both. But that is the route that you would probably want to hit. If you want to chat more about that, feel free to hit me up.
I can also say too, I mentioned earlier that my cyber protection team, we would deploy our weapon system, collect network traffic, and bring that back home to do their threat hunt mission. So my operators were responsible for all the software running on that stack of servers. Basically, the program office gave us a dozen servers, and we were responsible for the software, the shipping of the data, the aggregation of the data, the enrichment of that data was all developed by us. So it was incredibly satisfactory to see the work we put in directly enabling our mission. You might not have so much of an opportunity to see that in real time at a software factory, or even at the 90th, where you're given requirements and you develop for those requirements and you ship it. But in my case, it was like our homegrown tools, basically, so it was pretty cool.
On the DCO community, the primary tool set we use was built in-home and then later sold and pushed out to the greater community. I know my time on teams, a good guy with software is worth its weight in gold. Every team wanted them, every team wanted them on this mission because it creates nothing but output. So if you want to do software development, make that well known when you get to your unit, like I'm good at this. And show you can do it, and they will leverage you more than you want.
Yeah, Captain Kimball, I heard you mention this. If Green Door is something that we're interested in,
Is that something that, is that itself any shred, or is a certain shred more likely to see that opportunity?
I don't think there's been much success out of the schoolhouse.
What does green door mean to you?
Besides just doing something cool, I guess, I feel like the idea of doing that kind of work.
What kind of work do you think green door is?
On the spot. Like, kind of secret and not really too much known about it. Like, that's pretty much all I know. I know there's just a few kind of things that I'm going to talk about.
So you'll find that that's going to be true, honestly, across all of the mission groups that we support. Green Door is a special hiring authority that allows selective hiring by organizations that have been given that privilege to do that. And in many cases, it's because of a recognition of the importance of their particular mission and the need for very specific skill sets. But yes, I understand the excitement of something that, we can't tell you what we do, right? That I understand that kind of itch to know what that means. But I wouldn't constrain yourself to thinking that there are only exciting, interesting missions we can't talk about occur behind green doors. Is that fair?
Yeah, Green Door is not the program. Green Door is the way to get to some programs. But not
Right. And so we started to know that it was presented to the site. So yeah, all shreds have a need for that, right? They want to build a new hot new thing, and they need a computer guy to make sure it's viable. And they're going to put the right kind of computer guy with that. So we all do unique, interesting things. It's a matter of where to grab the opportunity that's presented, right? Obviously, on the Sierra side, we tend to get into that a little bit more because of what we do. With the Delta is definitely the problem. The Delta Alpha and the Delta Frontier definitely have opportunities. Just because of the kind of invasion environments they go into. Right? Still stuff like I can't tell you about it, but everyone has that opportunity.
And we've all only worked in skips, at least on the Sierra side. There's a reason for that. So most of the missions I run, the incident responses I did were on, most of them were on unclassified networks. Not all of them, but all the mission reports I wrote are classified.
I have less badges here than I've had for the last 5 years. So the Sierras get into it a little bit heavier.
Straight out of here, though, Green Door, probably not an option. But after your first assignment, if you'd like to get into that stuff, regardless of shred, it's there.
So my question is, from my understanding, it seems like each shred is kind of isolated, in the sense of working with different AFSCs, for instance, intel or acquisitions. Have any of you guys had that experience? And if so, can you speak on what that looks like? Because I just imagine there's so many jobs you can do within each shred. And I kind of want to see on the spectrum.
So from the Sierra side, I've worked with 1B4s, I've worked with acquisitions, I've worked with intel, I've worked with 3 deltas, and that's just in my own unit, right? And then on the CPT side, I go out and maybe this mission with a fighter squadron, with pilots, schedulers,
Maintainers,
physiological support, maintainers, maybe it's comms.
air traffic control.
Air traffic control, right? Like trying to explain to a pilot that his airplane's got a virus, is kind of weird, right? Like, but the CPTs have an opportunity to touch every AFSC, right? And one of the beauties of the 1 Bravo 4s is the majority of them, because I know you guys have a handful direct, right? The majority of them are cross-trained, like greater than 90% if I remember correctly. So my 1 Bravo 4s were comm guys, cops, intel, a couple of maintenance. Like they come from all walks of life, and you get those perspectives. It's amazing fun thing to do. So you're going to be able to touch everything on the DCO side. In your unit, your support structure is going to be siloed towards operational communication.
It depends on the unit, I would say. Depends on the shred a little bit, depends on the unit as well. Story from me, Special Operations Support Squadron has literally every AFSC that practically exists in the Air Force, because they're all supporting different things: logistics, plans, operations, intel, comm, personnel, cops, Dagger, like on the go security, all that. And we would go and deploy and exercise as a one cohesive unit. So at least from the Delta Bravo perspective, you get interface with pretty much every AFSC that exists across the spectrum. So.
Everything that Captain Trusnick said for DCO, echo that for OCO.
So opposed to coming in, doing the cyber stuff and meeting, but you guys actually work alongside with the mission.
Oh, yeah, like, one of the biggest blowbacks CPDs get, we show up to a base and like, oh, you're here to inspect us? No, sir, we're from the government, we're here to help, right? Like, it's, you have to talk to them to get ownership. Like I said, you have to communicate with these owners. So you have to interface with them. So we might be siloed in our respective tradecraft a little bit, right? But there's a lot of bleed over it. We still have to work with the rest of the Air Force. We're not sitting in little concrete rooms talking to ourselves.
In order to effectively prioritize the way you defend the mission, you need to understand the mission. So that's like a big part up front is talking to the operators all the way down to the props, the ATC, the maintainers, all the way down to the A1C, like why is this captain talking to me? And then putting all that together so that you can prioritize.
Some of the best ways we learn to do that are from pilots, but they have great ways of breaking mission down. We'll learn how to do it their way. There's a lot of crossflow. It doesn't feel like that because we're on a separate team.
Well, with the phones, I'm probably trying to go Sierra Alpha, Sierra Bravo, which I actually pursued. And I wanted to know like what the work-life balance is between like Sierra Alpha and Sierra Bravo. What that actually looks like.
Can I go first this time?
Sure.
No.
I was just gonna say, thanks for the question. I'll get to the part about work-life balance, but I did want to echo that, like, when I was here as a student, like 8 or so years ago, I really wanted to be an OCO operator. So that was super cool. I was a nerd as a teenager. I thought this is finally my chance to do this professionally. It wasn't in the cards for me from AFPC at the time, so I went down the DCO pathway. But in retrospect, at this point, I would definitely go back and tell Second Lieutenant Mills to take a hard look at DCO as well, because at this point, I can look back and see that it's given me a really broad appreciation for both sides. In order to be an effective DCO operator, you have to have a pretty full understanding of OCO, the latest techniques and tactics, right? Ironically, my friend Captain Comer has invited me back here to teach OCO now, even though I'm a DCO operator by trade. The work-life balance it can be rough on either side. It really depends on your job. Let's say you're a DCO operator at the 33rd, and you have pretty much a 9 to 5 shift doing your continuous monitoring mission there in the Security Operations Center, and you go home. When I was a CPT operator, there were times when I was on the road half the year doing incident response to Japan, Guam, Hawaii, Germany, England, all across CONUS. Depending on where things were going wrong, that's where I had to go. Deploy my weapon system, if possible, and then go back to San Antonio. Sometimes deploying the weapon system and going back to San Antonio wasn't possible. Maybe it was a classified enclave, and I had no way to talk to the data. So I had to sit in place until the mission was finished. So I assume it can kind of be the same way on the OCO side, just depending on the mission requirements. I personally have 3 kids, pets alike. We were able to balance that and make it work, right? I was talking with the current team lead for my old team just a couple of months ago, and their current tempo on that CPT is about 30% of the year they're on the road. So it's gotten a little better, but it's subject to fluctuate.
I would say that the OCO side is not quite, so if you think about what OCO does, generally speaking, we are projecting power in and through the cyber domain. And generally, that is in and through computer networks. And so if you step back for a second and think about the types of computer networks that if you are a general trying to fight a war, not every single network that you want to touch is going to be connected to the internet. In fact, many are not. However, for the most part, many of the operations conducted by the OCO community can be done from the internet. And so from that perspective, you don't have to be at any particular location to get that done. So in contrast to the DCO side, on the CPT side of things, the cyber protection team, The combat mission teams, the CMTs on the OCO side, can generally and do generally conduct their mission from all over the world. You could be theoretically, I'm not saying that this happens, you could theoretically be at an internet cafe at Starbucks or in some highly protected space at a cyber command facility or NSA facility. Generally speaking, that's possible. So the mandatory minimum requirement for travel on the OCO side is not as high. However, on the OCO side, I've had the opportunity to travel to a lot of very interesting locations. I spent time in Europe for operational reasons. My first assignment was in Hawaii, and there are a lot of really interesting travels that you can do, but in terms of work-life balance, by default, OCO does not have quite as high of a travel tempo as DCO does.
Or CPTs specifically.
Fair enough. Yep,
Yeah,
that's true.
so there's definitely defensive positions at the NOS CASAs, maybe the 26th, 561st, 81st, who are, helping those service delivery units to be defensively minded. They don't really have to go anywhere unless it's conferences or TDY to another unit for a few days, but the mission doesn't call them away like it does for a CPT. Same for the 33rd Network Warfare Squadron, where you're sitting in place providing cybersecurity as a service.
If I may, if you like to travel TDY, Delta Bravo, for sure. If you like to be stationed literally anywhere in the world, Delta Alpha. Tell you.
I will say the CPTs can get pretty hairy. Like they actually make the decided effort to schedule on and off mission. But that also fluctuates by what's going on in the world, right? The CPT I was on, actually, we were on sister units, did the same job. We shared an incident response team. Like you might have to do wheels up in 6 hours because it hit the fan and you need to take care of it, right? But they made efforts to try to give you work-life balance. But again, that's CPT centric. The NOSs, the COSs are a little bit more stable, but they still have 24-hour office, they still have 24-hour mission that you might be called in for. So part of it's just kind of being in the military and being in something.
Now, if I can add one small wrinkle about Delta Alphas being anywhere, this is coming true as well for Sierra Bravos due to MDTs, which are being stood up all over. And our career field manager has said he wants MDT operators to be Sierra Bravos, which makes sense to me as well. I'd rather train you as a Sierra Bravo since that's what you're going to be asked to do, even though traditionally it's been filled by the 17 Delta that was available in the comm squadron to fill that role. But that's what we're moving forward. And that's going to open the aperture for Sierra Bravos to go to MDTs across the globe.
I apologize, I have to step out, but I'm sorry, Lance, would you like to add anything on the Sierra side? Bravo side?
For the Sierra Alpha side, especially, same with 1v4s that have OCO experience. There's only 5.5 places you can really PCS to. So if you don't like Georgia, Maryland, Texas, Hawaii, and maybe in the far future Colorado, which good luck, you're going to one of those locations or here. And then the other part is that pretty much all of the COSs, all the 3 series as we call them, you are AEF coded as YR or year round, so you're not even really deployable either. So you're pretty much going to be sitting at home, which again, good and bad from that. We have ops that would go for 36 hours plus where we would actually sleep in the skiff because we need that continuity. But for the most part, every night I could go home and see my family. And that was huge for me personally. I know some guys that they want to go to DUI more often, and 6 months away sounds great. So it's whichever one you want.
Thank you.
We got time for one more question.
Lieutenant Belgica, could you quickly just describe like what the Space Force is and the 17 area? Are we going to do the same thing as like the Air Force guys, strengthened in, or are we
Do you have any answers for us?
or are we going to be like doing our own thing? You guys don't know.
Right now, it's my understanding, just based on conversations I'm having with my mentees and things, that it's by default Sierra Bravo, because of the strategy, the comm strategy for the Space Force right now. And that's the way we're treating it, is that you will be defensively minded, much like our operators sitting at the 33rd Network or our MDT operators.
It seems like they're trying to grow their force to be what we would envision in the future of the Air Force, where all of us are defensive assets. Some of us are more highly specialized. Right now, we're seeing
No.
No.
Sorry, I wish I was in Space Force, but I'm not. So. Expeditionary, Space Marines.
Oh, yeah.
All right. We good?
Yep. Do you have any last closing remarks for us? We want to.
No, I'd say if we introduced ourselves at the front at the beginning. I think you have our names. Those of you who haven't started, I would challenge you. Don't get too bogged down on like what am I going to do with my life, right? You're here, okay? You're here. You're trained. Focus on your training, okay? You're going to get a shred. You're going to get an assignment, and you're going to do great things wherever you go, okay? So don't kill yourself over it, okay? We're here to educate you on it, and I hope you got a little bit of that today. If you want to talk to any of us about our respective shreds or our respective experiences, by all means, we are here. That's why we're here, okay? So I challenge you, focus on what you're doing here, okay? We'll focus on a little bit about the future, okay? And then, again, we're here to help. Use us as a source, okay?
So keep in mind, you are not your shred, right? Like you guys said, we all sat up here, it's sibling rivalry. I love my Delta brethren, much as I love my Sierra brethren, right? Don't get hung up on what is after the 17th. Eventually, we're all gonna do the same thing, which is deal with the squadron somewhere. Right? We're all gonna be so.
Okay.
Great thoughts. Well, can we give them a quick round of applause?
All right.
Have a great Thursday. Yeah, so
Oh, you want to know when we're going to compare? We're in the holding pattern for the stop. Or something. I know.
appreciate you guys coming out.
That was it.
We feel well prepared for the material that you have on, or is this common?
So I was fortunate. So I was already working on the 6 months. And so my next assignment ended up being the staff position, and they had a weapon system manager. So basically, I got to be the manager. Also took on the CSCS weapon system with
We got lucky.
So
What is that?
that's the cybersecurity
Are you in instructor system?
or cybersecurity. Those are your INOS.
Did you,
Security centers.
yeah.
So, yeah, but all that to say, it was great because from there, I can now take the input from the people that are on the ground, bring it up to a major command level and say, okay, how do we organize training your units better than what we've been doing?
And it sounds like, all the people are doing a lot of like making transformation to partners. So that focus on keep it breathing.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's interesting is we do, I mean, we're going through training, we do very full-blown event process. When you're doing repetitive missions, and you're doing focused tactical missions, yeah, I'll be shortly.
Sorry, am I holding up for a meeting?
They're gonna be.
Gotta freeze the barbecue.
Yeah. Where was I going? Oh, yes. Yeah, so when we're doing more focused or repetitive stuff, your P-bed timeline gets much shorter. Because you all have understanding assumptions, you all have understanding.
Yeah, he's out now.
You're really getting to the plug and play of, okay, here is the thing that we're gonna do. Here's the objectives that we're aiming for. Are comp plan, and you try to keep a comp plan just about the same each time. The same in general. We shake things up for the fact that.
Does that make things hurdle and
He's so brilliant. He's so smart.
so
He's like one of those guys.
less able to quickly adapt. That's unfair.
I think that's the process allows flexibility. There's still lessons learned strongly in, especially for big projects. There'll be an after action report. There's a lot of empowerment at the manager level.
Just being brand new to it's a very clear process that is very clean and discreet, and the real world is very chaotic and messy. And so obviously it's about plan based off practical experience of what works. And I'm just curious to see how this mental picture of, oh yes, we were going to have phase 1, then phase 2, then phase 3 translates into the actual, meat and flesh world, if that makes sense.
It does, and that's a talent, that's a finesse of the operator, the operating team, is to realize that things are going away from the plan and make those adjustments on the fly. And that's really, if you really think about when supervisors and DOs and things like that, like with flight leadership, when they're looking at who's advancing well in their operational career, their operational track, who's adapting, like on the fly. But at the same time, still having a framework that they can fall back on. So you're not doing so many changes that it's okay, now you're tumbleweed, you're not even doing it. You're actually trying. And I will tell you, we've gotten a lot better. So I was thinking about 10 years ago.
How long have you been in?
I'll do 20.
Is your primary is that really common just with instructors, or is that pretty common in the course as well? How many RTC world that's with a bit of a primary type?
Yeah, we are. We're definitely celebrating. One of the good retirement. I would say maybe about 10%. About 10%.
Are you hoping to keep going farther than a lot farther than where you are now, or?
Yeah, I got to come here. Yeah, stoked to be able to come here, do this.
Yeah,
just talk about,
Do you, quick question, I know there's a focus on, constantly to technically maintain your proficiency. Is there an organizational focus on developing those soft skills and communication skills, or is that more just on your own time? learning how to be a better
Yeah, so I mean,
communicator and a
so
better
they're doing
writer,
that.
like, learning the finesse of politics of, oh, this is how the budget cycle works. Oh, this is the key person to talk to at this time of the year to get, funding for our project. Here is, I read how to run people, so I use my field learning skills to present the pitches the best way to finesse, getting my,
Yeah, are they gonna be maybe 17?
right. That seems like
Because I mean, that's
there's a
one
lot
of
of
the
underrated skills, skills that you develop and learn that are separate from discrete. Here's your mission, just your job description, and your training. And so far, it seems like you have to figure that out.
So the good bosses
Yeah.
provide those opportunities. Good are gonna have,
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
they're gonna set aside the time for sessions. So that's great to say, hey, lunch on Friday. Hand everything over to your senior NCOs, they're gonna run this shop. We're gonna call.
Okay.
One of them was strictly